last week I put out a community post asking you all for character descriptions that I would then try to draw into characters. And you all had such good descriptions, it was really hard to choose which ones I was actually going to use. So let's see what descriptions you all provided and what characters came out of them. Let's create some chaos! First up, we've got a submission from Galhound19 with Atomic Cowgirl, cowboy emoji, aka Sally Lockart. She wears the average Western attire with a 10-gallon hat, denim jeans, and knotted crop top revealing her belly and navel piercing. But she also has heavy cybernetic armament around her arms and legs to channel all that atomic energy that's flowing through her body. She can levitate 5 meters off the ground, shoot concussive blast of energy, and when she gets really serious, she materializes a huge 6-barrel atomic revolver gun mounted on her right arm. With just one shot, she could turn a whole town into a smoldering crater. The character has pale skin and platinum blonde hair tied in braided pigtails. Her right eye glows blue and the left eye glows green. And Galhound19 also provided a backstory that reads as follows. Sally Lockart was the pride of her hometown back in Texas. Graduating from MIT at 16, she went on to working at a renowned mechanics research facility. All things were going well for her until one day there was a terrible accident where Sally was exposed to a lethal amount of atomic radiation. To save Sally's life, one of her work colleagues exposed her to an alien virus. It was a drastic risk, like playing biological bingo, but it worked. The virus cells absorbed all the harmful radiation, but that didn't mean Sally was back to the way she was before. She was left so weak that bionic limbs had to be grafted over her existing ones so that she could regain mobility. But things only got harder from her when an alien military cell sought after the virus, which was now within Sally's body. All hardships, of course, but Sally was never one for pouting. She fought back and in doing so realized that from the virus and the radiation, she had acquired superpowers. Okay, I didn't expect to be doing the voice throughout the entire reading of the comment, but you know what? I'm okay with it. As soon as I saw this one, I got a pretty good idea of how I wanted the character to look. I do really like the idea of adding cybernetic components to different genres of things, especially more of the old-timey genres like westerns and medieval. So right off the bat, I'm like, this is gonna be a really cool character. Unfortunately, when it comes to drawing cybernetic anything for that matter, I'm very worried when I go into the piece because I'm not quite sure how I'm gonna sketch out the details and the different metal pieces interacting with one another when it comes to more metallic and robotic pieces. Once I get to the rendering, I'm fine. I know exactly how to render metal, at least in my current style. I would like to experiment with more liquid type metals per se, but solid plating metal I know 100% how to render. It's just getting that initial design down that always worries me. Though, by practicing, I definitely think I'm getting better at drawing them, especially the sleek, high-end type of cybernetic arms where it's just the one plate of metal with a few subsections in it. The more scrappy and grafted, per se, cybernetic pieces where it's like a bunch of different types of metal plates stuck together is one that I think I definitely need more work on. I took a slightly different approach with the face when it came to designing this character, more specifically within the eyes. I added a lot more detail during the sketching and line art phase than I normally would, where I would normally just choose a basic shape and model the eyes around that with a few changes. But for Sally Lockart, I added lashes on the top and bottom of the outer corners of the eye just to give variation, because I want to try to apply this more in the future to better differentiate between characters and come up with more unique character designs overall. The braids are another element that I'm really happy with how they turned out. If you recall, back in Voice Actor Fusions Part 3, I had tried long braided hair for Vicky Jinx Maru when I was trying to render out Jinx's long braided pigtails. And I wasn't really happy with how they turned out. I felt the sectioning of it was just too blocky and didn't really look like braids. So when it came to this character, I spent time specifically studying how the braids flow and intertwine as a hairstyle. I still think it needs some work. The pattern is a little irregular, but it's a major step up from the Voice Actor Fusions Part 3 episode. The arm-mounted 6-shooter was such a cool design choice for this character, and another reason that it really stuck out and wound up getting chosen. And even though it is a manifestation that Galahound wrote could be conjured up by Sally, I did incorporate it into the cybernetic arm itself. You can see like there's a gap in the arm as if the gun was coming out of it. And it doesn't exactly work with the hard light construct that I drew it as, but it definitely does look cool as hell. So I'm all for creating something that doesn't really make sense design-wise if it just makes the overall design look really cool. And just overall, I love the colors of it, the blues and the greens mixed with the pale skin and hair and then the darker outfit, and just it all came together nicely. And the background for this particular piece was something that I threw together at the very end, right before I started scripting and recording, and you'll see why that is when we get into the next two drawings. But first, let's take a look at the final design of Atomic Cowgirl, Sally Lockart, provided by Galahound 19. Our next character description comes from Apple Flavors, and their comment read,
"Howdy there, KyngPin. God of torture here. Now, I have many forms, so I'll keep it simple. Before Apple wakes up and realizes I've gained a mortal form, or at least a physical one. Imagine a taller skeletal figure with no legs endlessly floating. A toothy yet well-aligned set of human teeth on the stomach. Yes, I have my mouth on my stomach. So what? And any kind of unique horns that glow blue. I do have arms, though not connected to my torso, which are more blades or thin spikes with paws at the ends that act as my hands. Abilities: a normal acid, death, or fire rain. And my iconic stomach mouth being connected to the endless black void that is my stomach. Okay. Oh, my face only has one big eye. Good luck, that is if you choose me. Now gotta go before Apple awakes."
First off, writing it in the perspective of the character is a really creative way to provide your character description, and I really like that, Apple Flavors. And for this piece, I went a little more splash art than the previous one, and doing that kind of affected how the rest of this episode played out art-wise. Because in this piece, I really wanted to get practice with more harsh perspectives, so I opted for a low angle looking up at the character. The design in this one, I'll admit, was a little tricky to get right. First off, I didn't really know what skeletal meant, and research didn't exactly help. I was torn between drawing an actual skeleton and just a very thin and bony body type. I opted going with the latter, mostly because drawing bones is very hard, and I thought I could come up with a better design by including flesh on the character. I also really couldn't figure out how to incorporate both a lack of legs and to show that it was constantly floating, especially at the angle I chose. So I added these tentacles that technically don't count as legs, so I'm all good on that part, but is up in the air whether the character's floating as the tentacles fill up the bottom half of the picture. So if you think the character is floating, then I'm all good. And if you don't think the character is floating, then I'm really sorry I left out that part of the character description. My favorite part of this design by far is the single eye in the middle of the face and the stomach mouth. The angle of the eye itself, because it's a very harsh angle to draw a head facing up, especially if the eye, which would come a little bit out of the socket at that angle, was just in the center of the face and looking directly up. That, I think, worked out perfectly. The bottom of the face, I feel, wasn't the best angle, but just the eye and the way it reacts with the light is so good. Same thing with the stomach mouth. I do think the angling on it is a little off. It's a little turned to the side that goes against how the body is turned. But just the teeth, the practice of the lips, and the shading on that one too looks really good. Also, I did have a little fun with fantasy magical brushes to depict the void in the middle of the mouth. The background in this piece and the rain were really fun to do. As I mentioned in the last one, a lot of my background work in the past has been more physical environments, including forest of trees and cliffs and stuff like that. But this background here was a lot more abstract, and I chose to focus a lot more on the colors and the lighting rather than physical objects. And as for the acid rain that I chose to depict between the acid, death, and fire, which, now that I think about it, probably could have been cool to have all three coming down, maybe in like sections, like left is acid, middle is death, right is fire. But that's an afterthought now in recording, unfortunately. For the rain, I used a combination of weather brushes that I downloaded from Envato Elements, and for the background, and hand brushing in other drops in the foreground. And with the hand brush, I was able to push what the rain brush was able to do by making droplets on the character and impact splashes. But I think the best part overall was in the center, where I had the raindrops being sucked into the void, kind of like a black hole that's just absorbing anything that comes near it. I think it's a subtle thing, but it's such a cool little detail that if you're really looking at and you notice, it's really like, oh, that's kind of cool. Thank you, Apple Flavors, for the description, and let's take a look at the final result. And last but not least, we have Nerd Comics Inc., who provided the character for Forsight. Powers and abilities: has 4 different kinds of supervision: heat vision, x-ray vision, future vision, and past vision. She's also a proficient assassin, wielding several swords, guns, grenades, and other excessive weaponry that is clearly compensating for something. Design: Forsight is a female character with light skin and brown hair tied in a messy ponytail, which is visible through her armor. She is entirely covered in silver armor with neon highlights that alternate between red, green, blue, and yellow, based on which of her 4 powers she is currently using. She also has a visor on her face in the shape of a thin horizontal X. Backstory: Vivian Gray was at the top of her game. She was a U.S. military commander, greatly respected by her troops for her combat abilities, as well as her leadership skills. She herself greatly enjoyed fighting, especially all the praise and attention that she received due to her talents. That was until one tragic accident. One wrong flash grenade caused Vivian to lose her eyesight. She was giving an honorable discharge, but her life felt empty without the praise and adoration. That was until she was offered a deal. The very same dictator that she had been fighting against in the war offered her a chance to try out some experimental technology that would grant her more sight than she ever had with fully working eyes. However, she would have to ally herself with him and work as a master assassin, killing anyone he asked. Ultimately, she agreed. If I didn't push my understanding with perspective in the last drawing, then I definitely turned it up to 11 in this one. I was inspired to try out perspectives overall, but more specifically this upper angle looking down on the character from a subscriber of the channel and member of the Discord server named Ark, who has been doing similar perspectives in their drawings recently. And boy, the upper angle is really a tricky perspective to work with. Just with how the way all the limbs should bend while still adhering to the perspective, and the foreshortening of all the different parts of the bodies. How like the legs are so much shorter than the torso when that's not usually the case with a dead-on perspective. However, I definitely do want to look more into perspective in the future because I think it really could expand what I'm able to do with my art going forward. Now, with all that being said, I do feel like I did sacrifice the actual character pose for the perspective in order to make sure the character complied with the upper angle and the harsher perspective, making sure all the body proportions were right. I kept the character herself very still, so all the body was kind of conforming to one angle of lines. And though I do think it makes the piece a bit stiff, I feel like the perspective and the heat vision blast really balance it out and still make it a good piece. And like with Galahound's character, I was worried about the cybernetics and the silver armor going into this drawing. And it was more nerve-wracking for this piece because I didn't want to have the same exact design for the cybernetics as I did with Galahound's character. And while I do think it looks different enough, I did some different things with the sectioning and how the pieces interacted with each other. I do feel like I probably could have went on Pinterest or something and looked up other cyberpunk-esque styles to just get other ideas of how cybernetics could look on a person. Going back to the perspective a little bit, the optic heat blast is just the MVP of this piece. Not only does it provide the main light source and a sense of action in an otherwise still pose, but it also draws the viewer's eye from the blast down to the character's face and then down to the rest of her body, really making a solid composition in terms of guiding the viewer's eye line, which really great. Also, Forsight, I forgot to mention this before, but Forsight as a character with 4 different optical based superpowers is such a cool name. Overall, I do wish I incorporated more of the powers into the piece, but I understood it as she can only use one power at a time. And so I went with the optical blast because it's the most physical. Although I could have done something with the X-Ray too, similar to what I did in the Dempsey J Illustrations and Allen Animations collab with James Sterner, the Beaver, where the entire background was an X-Ray. I feel like I could have done something with that here, but I like the way the heat blast is interacting with the environment lighting style. So I like how it came out, but if there was like a comic or something with this character, then I think there could be some really cool visual representations for the other 3 powers that didn't get their chance to shine in this one piece. But overall, a really cool description from Nerd Comics Inc. Though I do think reading it over again that I might have forgotten to add in the weapons, which I apologize for, but for that with perspective, maybe I'm not quite there yet. Maybe in a future video. But overall, great character description. I love how my design turns out. Interested to know what you think. Let's take a look at the final result. This was such a fun video to do. And I also believe it was, or a similar type of video, was suggested by one of you in the comments, though looking back, I couldn't find out who it was. So if somebody did suggest the characters from a description type video, thank you so much. It was such a fun video and a really good learning experience for me. I intend in the future to watch some tutorials on perspective to really understand how it works, but For a first go around for some of these harsher perspectives, I think it turned out pretty good. And now, before we announce the awards that'll go to these ones, let's take a look at last week's episode, Five Nights at Freddy's in D&D, and see which pieces won which awards. Our first award was Best Interpretation of a D&D Class, or Best Design overall, and our winner was Warforged Bonnie. Next up, we had the creepiest design overall, which was a tie between Lich Trap and the Reborn Blood Hunter, Michael Afton. And for the personal favorite overall was an overwhelming landslide of Lich Trap. Once again, thank you so much to everyone who voted. I really like doing this Mario Party-esque after awards kind of thing for the pieces. It's just a fun way to know which ones you all liked and to get people involved. And some highlighted comments from the last episode. Our first comment comes from Jacob W618, who says, "It's kind of funny how, after getting into another D&D hyperfixation, you make a D&D video. I'd love to see you do more D&D themed videos, like maybe a Murder Drones episode, since the series finale is in 4 days, parentheses, I'm not okay. Neither am I." Also, favorite design has gotta be Lich Trap, because his name is Lich Trap. The entire reason he's one of my favorites is the wordplay just works too well. That's really awesome. I'm glad you like them. Especially the names. I feel like some name pieces I'm naming some of the pieces I could be a little better at. But overall, I'm really happy you liked it. And I am not prepared for the Murder Drone season finale, which would have already happened by the time this video goes out. But point still stands. Our next comment is another one from Nikolai, who says, "Both William and Mike here have seen better days, but I feel sorry for Mike. William, on the other hand, yeah, he can go burn himself. Totally agreed. Mike, he's cool. Mike doesn't deserve it. William, on the other hand, done. Get rid of him. Get him out of here. Get him out of here." And finally, our last comment comes from Inkman Studios, who says, "This was great. Any chances for part 2? Well, I didn't really intend on it, but seeing how well everyone really likes it, it's one of the most viewed videos on the channel in the last couple of months. I'd say the chances for part 2 might actually be pretty good." And finally, we have our awards for these 3 pieces here. In the comments below, feel free to vote on which artwork had the best pose or perspective, best artwork overall, meaning character and background together, and the coolest character design. And that's all I've got for you today. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to hit the like and subscribe button. And if you want to see more videos like this, where I'm doing art based on your designs, comments, and whatnot, then I highly recommend you check out the KyngPin Recreations playlist up at the top, where at the end of every month, I give my subscribers a prompt and then redraw their designs. Thank you all so much for watching. My name is KyngPin Recreations, and I will see you next week for the August recreations. Take care, everybody.